Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausum Pereira. COVID-19 cases are rising rapidly across many Indian states, raising concerns that the country could be headed towards a deadlier second wave of the virus. But even as India grapples with the logistical and infrastructure challenges of vaccinating its vast population, it has garnered international praise for its efforts in supporting global vaccine production and supply efforts. In January 2021, India launched the Vaccine Maitri initiative, a major diplomatic effort to gift and supply made in India vaccines to low income and developing countries globally. As one of the world's largest producers of pharmaceuticals, India is a serious contender in the race to produce COVID-19 vaccines. India's pharmaceuticals powerhouse provides generic medicines globally and produces nearly 60% of the world's vaccines. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze India's vaccine diplomacy. Joining me on the program today are Ambassador Gurjeet Singh, retired diplomat, Sriram Chawlia, Foreign Affairs Analyst, and Pramit Pal Chowdhury, Foreign Editor of the Hindustan Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. How would you look back at India's COVID-19 diplomacy? We've sent vaccines, several batches of them, to countries all around the world. How would you say that we've done so far?
I think this is something we can pat ourselves on the back about, even though it's for a bad thing, how to deal with the pandemic. So it's rather sad to say that we are making hay out of the pandemic, but I think that is the truth. And I think, normally diplomacy tries to aggregate a nation's strength and use it to the best interests of the nation. Now, here was an opportunity, almost like Y2K, where you could come up with vaccine production and provide it openly, open-heartedly through your Vaccine Maitri program to different parts of the world. So while earlier India was known as a producer of vaccines, today we are known as a happy distributor of vaccines as well. Secondly, I think even before this pandemic, everybody knew that about 60% of the world's vaccines are produced in India. So ultimately, wherever a vaccine was developed, the production was invariably likely to come to India. And I think today we are producing 2 vaccines. And I think very soon, everything but the Chinese vaccine will probably get produced in India. How well we have done? I think we've done very well. I think we have supplied about 80 lakh vaccine doses as grants. We have provided about double that number to COVAX and double that number as commercial contracts. So it's a fairly large thing. At the same time, we have gathered momentum of our domestic requirements. So both these are going hand in hand, which you may say is a fairly good way of dealing with diplomatic access, because you are saying that I'm willing to share what I have. But I'm not denying my population, but I'm willing to share what I have. And sometimes when I see that Indian vaccines are landing in distant, like Indo-Pacific in the Fiji, or the other day in Ivory Coast, most impressive. So of course, when you map this out, you realize that I think in many countries it is direct Indian supply, in many countries it is through the COVAX facility, and some of course are through the commercial route. So I think this is a well-formed, well-intentioned, good-hearted diplomatic maneuver.
Absolutely. And Pramit, let me bring you in now. Can we turn this goodwill into gains at some point in time? Because like the ambassador has very rightly pointed out, our vaccines have gone all around the world and gone to several countries as well. So can we turn this into gains at some point in time?
Well, I think we've already done that in our immediate neighborhood. A lot of the Vaccine Maitri program has really focused on places like Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, the island nations of the Indian Ocean, in Myanmar. So we've built a lot of credibility, I would argue, through this Vaccine Maitri program in our immediate neighborhood. In the initial phase, we've been able to, as the ambassador mentioned, distribute to, if I remember correctly, about 70 million, nearly 70 million doses in various forms, either through the COVAX program or on our own to about some 80 countries around the world. So, and we've been able to distribute them to really far off places, the Caribbean, African countries, the South Pacific, a lot of small nations who've otherwise really struggling to get anybody's attention and have no capacity to buy or acquire um, vaccines, and we've been able to send them. Perhaps not enough to cover their countries, but a few 100,000 here, 200,000 there, so on. Nigeria, for example, has received 4 million from us. Um, so I think right now, almost everybody in the world, and you can go through the media around the world in any language, India's capacities in vaccine production is known everywhere. And countries like, let's say, Brazil, which has a really terrible case of COVID, is trying to not only have received AstraZeneca from us, 2 million doses on an emergency basis, is now trying to buy 20 million Bharat Biotech ones, partly because its own scientists believe that that is actually the best vaccine for their own mutation variants in their country. So there is an Indian manufactured, Indian developed vaccine getting a huge customer, if you wish, and propelling India again into a slightly higher space technologically. And I think Gurjit is completely right. The Y2K, I've actually heard Indian officials refer to it as a sort of new Y2K. But the challenge is now going to come after that initial burst that we could do and pick up a lot of credits for that. We are now having, of course, to restrict our exports because of our own second wave development. And the country you can see trying to move into that space is China. For the next couple of months, we will not be a good story. It will be other countries or countries will try to move into that space. And that's going to be, I think, our immediate challenge.
Absolutely. Since we are here, then Sriram Chawla, let's talk about this aspect as well. Is China trying to trying to push India by the side and try and occupy that space that we have so nicely taken over the last 1 year or so through our vaccine diplomacy, right from the initial stages onwards, with trying to provide for hydroxychloroquine. At that point in time, we thought that was the miracle drug. So that's why everyone around the world was going crazy about it, and India supplied them as well. So right from then on, India has taken the lead as far as COVID management is concerned and providing for the world. Is that now going to be undone because of the number of cases that we are seeing in India? And is this the opportunity that China is going to pounce on?
Frank, first of all, we have not imposed any export ban. Ministry of External Affairs has clarified that all we have done is we are recalibrating the supply. There are going to be some delays in deliveries, promised deliveries to certain countries. But unlike many countries that have resorted to this vaccine nationalism and possessiveness, we have been quite generous. In fact, I have very interesting statistics. You're talking about China. China has exported 48% of the vaccines that it has manufactured domestically. India has exported 44% of vaccines manufactured domestically. The EU, the European Union, has exported 42% of vaccines manufactured in the EU countries. And the US has not exported anything, it's 0%. Now, if you look at China, it looks like it has exported more than us in terms of, as a proportion of what they have manufactured. But then, we have higher incidence of COVID-19 in India than in China. And the Chinese have resorted to extreme measures, what they call a people's war, to stamp out the virus pretty much. So if you take that factor in, then we have been the most generous of all suppliers in the world. We have balanced the domestic needs with our solidarity and soft power goals internationally. So in that sense, I don't think it's a case of China overtaking us in any way. And also remember, there's a huge question mark about the efficacy and the reliability of the Chinese vaccines. Most of them have not been upheld in the clinical trial process. The AstraZeneca, which is a British manufactured one with the Serum Institute, and the Covaxin, which is totally indigenous, done by Bharat Biotech in Hyderabad. Now, these two have fared better in clinical trials. So it's also a question of, I mean, the Chinese can dump vaccines in as many countries as they like, or even give them free of cost, or subsidize them, or take out loans to further trap developing countries into their orbit. But the question is, are they solving the problem on the ground? You see, recently Sri Lanka decided not to take more Chinese vaccine because they were not working. So there is this whole question mark about their efficacy. So it's as always, in people's minds, even though China has become a great power, there is this doubt in people's mind that China produces poor quality stuff and dumps it around the world at subsidized cost at below market rates to capture markets. So that predatory exporter kind of image that China has, we don't have. So if you look at all those factors, I don't think we are going to be bested by them in any way. It's a question of quantity versus quality, and even in quantity, I think we have got a higher manufacturing capacity in this area, and so I think eventually people will see the effects on the ground, which is protecting people from infection. And remember, why are we even talking about this whole thing? The root of the crisis began with China. They're still hiding the origins of the virus. The WHO inquiry has been a complete farce, and people are very angry. Even now, they have not forgotten what China did, and which is the reason we are in this crisis in the first place. The failure of the Chinese Communist Party and its neglect in preventing the spread of the virus. So,
Sure.
if you take all that into account, we are in good shape. We don't have to feel insecure about it. But of course, yes, we need to ramp up supply, and we need to ramp up more manufacturing capacity. One good initiative, which is the Quad countries have decided to finance India, to select India as the base where they will pool in large volumes, I think more than $1 billion. And by end of this year, we will have more, manufactured doses available to again give out more generously. So I think, yeah, so like Pramit is saying, there was an upswing for 2 to 3 months. There will be a bit of a downswing, but we are going to bounce back because of these factors.
Okay. Ambassador, since we are here, let me take another aspect of China forward with you. You were speaking earlier in the program about Ivory Coast. Pramit was speaking about Nigeria and how India has done extremely well with its vaccine diplomacy in Africa. So is this an opportunity for us to further strengthen our ties with Africa as well? Because you know that China is playing a big part in Africa.
Undoubtedly, but where Africa is concerned, I always remember what the AU Commissioner for Science and Technology told me a few years ago, that yes, China does more, but India always does better. So I think that is something we need to keep at the back of our minds. I think where vaccine diplomacy in Africa is concerned, I think there are two very clear streams. The Chinese effort has been to quickly vaccinate the elites of each country in Africa. The other day when I met a senior minister from an African country, he told me he had been vaccinated when I know there was no vaccination going on in his country. And then I found out that almost all cabinets in most African countries had been vaccinated by Chinese donations and action. Where India is concerned, the calibration that Sriram Cholia talks about is basically this, that we will give each country in the first phase enough to inoculate your health staff, your primary health workers who are going to look after the people. So this typical attitude of going for the political elite or going for a functional elite is one of the essential differences between India and China. Secondly, yes, over a period of time, suddenly you may see a Chinese spurt. But this spurt is because, as Pramit has pointed out, because of a pause in the level of Indian exports, which may have to be enforced. But this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, because please remember, the COVID is going nowhere. Your efficacy of the vaccine is how long, nobody really knows. Today I was speaking to a friend in Indonesia and she was asking me what vaccine I took and she had taken Sinopharm because that's the only one she could get. And she said, we are aghast to learn that the efficacy is only 2 or 3 months. But all this is hearsay right now. We need more evidence. So whatever it may be, even the flu vaccine had to be taken annually. So I presume the COVID vaccine would at least have to be taken annually. And since it's a far more rampant disease and you have already spread it, the vaccination over many countries, you are going to need it there many times over. So then the market for this is assured. What we need to do is get more vaccines produced in India. Sriram Cholia has rightly pointed out about the Quad initiative. Now, the Quad initiative is not looking at Africa. It is essentially looking at supplying the Indo-Pacific. But we should make sure that both biotech and the Serum Institute supplies to Africa can be augmented on demand as time goes on. Because that is now not going to be simple diplomacy, it is going to be market economics.
And since we are here, since we're talking about market economics, Pramit, let's also talk about this aspect. Is this a major economic opportunity for India as well? Because more and more countries are looking towards India's expertise in producing vaccines. Over the years, we've done that extremely well. Is this an opportunity for India to produce vaccines for the world and hence, prosper economically as well?
Well, yes, it's put our pharma industry right at the heart of the international healthcare system. We have always had a good generics industry, but the vast bulk of our generics exports, almost 70%, have essentially gone to North America and nowhere else. There is we do export a little bit to Africa, but marketing agreements, various other issues have kept us out of places like Southeast Asia, Europe, and so on, the Middle East. It's still continued. One of the reasons the Serum Institute has not been able to export to, let's say, Southeast Asia or to Europe, but has only been recently allowed, initially was because of marketing understanding with AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca said these areas we handle from our European or Southeast Asian plants. The Indian plants can only sell to certain parts of the world. That's been partially broken down now because of shortages everywhere. But the game, I think, after this is to be able to try and build a global market to argue that India should have the right, or governments should have the right, to break such advanced procurement understandings, such market agreements, because in an emergency or when in any time when the governments concerned, the recipient governments, feel it necessary to do so. That's one element of it. Second, a lot of the Western press or other press have tended to not focus too much on India's innovation in pharma, largely because right now the bulk of our exports continue to be produced by British vaccine created by Oxford University and AstraZeneca. Now, Bharat Biotech is the first Indian one that has now entered the market. It still needs international clearances. Once it does and begins to export, we'll see that. But there are others, a number of other Indian companies who are coming in with their own versions of vaccines. And there's going to be, as Gurjit has correctly said, this is something that we are going to have to do every year for a number of years, in the same way that a lot of us continue to have to do bird flu, swine flu vaccinations, even after the original epidemic/pandemic died out. And the virus's mutation means that each year this vaccine is going to have to be reformulated. So you're going to see a fairly large market with several different types of vaccines, different mutations of this virus in different parts of the world, which require different types of vaccines again. And again, it is our production of capacity as well as our innovation that should help us position ourselves as the dominant player in this. China has not been a great vaccine producer, except for its own population. It has definitely not been a great innovator of vaccines. Even the Global Times, a Chinese paper normally not very favorable to India, wrote an article admitting that India's vaccine capacity was a global asset. And you'll notice that Russia, the Russian Sputnik vaccine, at least if the phase 3 trial data coming out of India is indication that is actually quite good. It is most of that production is going to come out of India. We will be producing about 100 million batches a month once all of the 3 companies in India that have are going to be producing this go into full gear. So we will be the producer of even the Russian vaccine, let alone the Oxford one and so on. So on a whole host of fronts, we hopefully be positioning ourselves and advertising ourselves. The way we need to benefit from this, however, in terms of our pharma industry, is that we need to innovate, not just in vaccines, but in other medicines. Right now, we continue to be basically copying other people's innovations. Hopefully, this will be a chance for India's big pharma to come out and produce their own molecules and create that we now will have a market and a brand in which we can now then sell our own medicines, because that's really where the big profits rise. And the vaccine hopefully will open the door to that. But big pharma, and probably with some support from the Indian government, needs to see that opportunity.
Absolutely. And Sriram Chaulia, as far as supply chains are concerned, is this an opportunity for us to reset supply chains? Is this an opportunity to look at new supply chains as well? That is one. Secondly, what is the learning from all of this as far as Indian companies are concerned and Indian diplomacy is concerned?
Yeah, the over dependence on global supply chains has become a major risk factor. Uh, and you saw even with the Suez Canal blockage, that one part of the world is importing from far, far, far away. So at least, especially in Asia, when we say pharmacy of the world, I think in terms of transportation, in terms of geographical closeness, people have been saying that we did not join the RCEP, and we are outside the regional integration processes. But with Quad on our back, I think we can build, healthcare networks also. One is the infrastructure. That's one big area where already Quad has ambitions of doing connectivity. The other is technology like 5G and all this, and to provide alternatives to the Chinese, Huawei and others. And the third should be healthcare, and in fact, our traditional medicines often have not been sufficiently popularized in other regions of the world, even though the world has a lot of respect for ancient India and its marvels. So there, we have Ayush Ministry and all these things now. So I think there is opportunity through this crisis for many sorts of our companies to be able to spread out their wings and to be recognized instantaneously, become a household name, because India did such a extraordinary task during the pandemic, the crisis of the pandemic. As far as the diplomacy, I think going forward, we should continue doing the good work that has been started this year. And I think more and more, Dr. Jaishankar and his team have been talking about trust as a very central factor in all this. Trusted partner, trusted network, trusted supply chains. The whole thing is around trust. So I think we have to play more on that factor. For example, the Chinese did a lot of negative attacks on Western pharma companies and even on Indian ones. The Chinese have been trying to run down rival manufacturers of vaccines, and they're trying to spread propaganda claiming that theirs is superior and all. But the fact is, I think we tend to be a little bit laid back in terms of promoting ourselves. We say that, well, our good work speaks for itself, and we should not be crassly advertising and all that. But I think in the social media age, we should be a little more aggressive with publicity. Definitely the first round, last 3 months, we have gotten sufficient publicity internationally. But I think public diplomacy, we need to be smarter and to show more examples like what Ambassador Gurjeet Singh was talking about, on the ground in many developing countries, how people are grateful to India for receiving our vaccines. I saw one of the Prime Minister of Fiji in his traditional attire thanking India, for example. Bhutan has been doing this, and many countries are doing it, but these are mostly elites. But if we get down a little further and show how ordinary people's lives are improving, I think our embassies, our high commissions, our consulates, especially in the least developed countries, should have testimonies, on record, because end of the day, is people say we don't get bang for the buck. We spend money, we do a lot of good things, but then we don't get bang for the buck. So a little bit more, I would say, a marketing approach to showing how much good we did and what kind of impact it had on the world. I think that will make us more proactive in being able to reap the rewards of this massive, philanthropic exercise. It's primarily a philanthropic exercise. I don't think we are making money out of this. It's not really a commercial endeavor this year, but eventually we want to convert this, like Pramit was saying, into market gains. And for that, I think branding ourselves, just calling ourselves pharmacy of the world is not enough. A peasant in Mozambique should be able to say, we love India because India brought this to our village. So I think we
Yes,
have to go reach out to the at that level in public diplomacy, and I hope that we will invest resources in doing this.
absolutely. All right, time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward. Starting first with you, Ambassador.
Thank you. So I agree with Pramit that we need to develop our own vaccines and across the board in the public health space and the health space. Now, for this, essentially the private sector has to be incentivized and supported. Now, there is an Asia Development Bank facility for vaccine access, almost $9 billion. We should make sure that we access such facilities to bring the gains of that financing to our private sector so that role can be expanded. I think this is where we need to now enforce our efforts to say that we will get you international finance to come and support, and this finance should be through these windows of multilateral development banks, which India should access on behalf of the private sector. And I think this will really help us to put the right stamp on what we need to achieve ahead.
Pramit?
Yeah, so we are, as it was all mentioned, in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll see a sharp drop in Indian exports as we move to roughly a 5 million vaccination a day program in India. That's to be expected. The real goal now is going to be, the real game we have to be looking at is what happens roughly from June onwards, when hopefully our own vaccine, the game is now that our vaccine production has to now rise to the level that we start to generate a surplus once again, which right now we do not have. We should see that if Sputnik, the 3 Indian companies that make Sputnik can ramp up to 100 million. Serum Institute has said that its combination of, I think, Novavax as well as AstraZeneca will go to about 100 million. Bharat Biotech goes to 70 million. The J&J one, now, thanks to with quad money coming in, to go to 40, 50, 100 million doses a month, plus other companies coming in, the Moderna and so on, various production lines that are coming up. Other than the Pfizer one and the Chinese ones, we will be producing all of the vaccines that are presently present in the global market. We can then ramp up to 400, 500 million doses a month, at which point we will have massive surplus capacity and then be able to start to send that overseas again. Building that capacity, but also getting the regulatory clearances across the world, and with especially the WHO. To get the WHO to clear one of your vaccines, then automatically dozens of countries automatically will accept it. This combination will allow us to once again go right to the top of the ladder as far as vaccine production, distribution against COVID-19 in the world, and that's something we need to start preparing for.
Absolutely. And Sriram Chaulia, close the show for us with your quick concluding remarks.
Well, Frank, I think it's not only the doses, that's of course very primary and the most important, but India has also been extending capacity building to healthcare workers in select countries, especially least developed LDCs, which you have very primitive capacity to even set up vaccination centers, administer vaccines. So nurses, doctors, hospital workers, we have been training some of them. In other words, we are creating the ecosystem also in some countries to be able to even implement their own domestic vaccination campaigns. And remember, our domestic campaign is going on, but if you look at our record, polio and all these things, diseases that we have managed to overcome historically over the last several decades, we have done like 400 500 million or more people have been vaccinated. Mass vaccination, we have a specialty in mass vaccinations, which is actually more like a service rather than the actual good of the liquid in the bottle, in the vial. So I think that also we could use in the so-called downtime when we don't have much supply going out. We should do more of this training and capacity building of healthcare workers in other countries, so that we can then say that we trained them to be able to hand over and to take over this thing in their own countries and to build their local capacity. That's always been India's strength, and apart from vaccine manufacturing. So let's continue to do that capacity building of the human resources in the healthcare sector of needy countries, and that will be much remembered.
All right. All right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that India has done very well with its COVID diplomacy. However, with the number of cases going up domestically, we will see a sharp decline in exports. We need to focus on scaling up and improving our capacity, inoculate our own citizens, and continue the good work of exporting vaccines. For now, it is more of a philanthropic exercise, but there is great economic potential in vaccine diplomacy. In order to achieve market gains, we need to brand ourselves better and ensure that the goodwill is taken to the masses. Thank you once again for being here. Remember to like and subscribe to Bharata First on YouTube. Ensure that you click the bell icon and then select all notifications. Do follow the social media handles as well, and I need your support now more so than ever. Please spread the word, and see you again next time.